morning. Welcome to Caffeinate Your Career. Today's topic, overcoming adversity. I'm your host, the career coach with the most, Jason Hopper. With me today is my special guest, Mr. Nelson Weil. Nelson, welcome to Caffeinate Your Career.
Thank you, Jason.
Checking to see if we're live. And we are live.
Oh, good. Better than last time.
Everything, yes. Nelson was nice enough to come back. The first time he was here, almost a month ago, and good, I can hear us, so that's good. And we had technical difficulties. And come to find out, it wasn't just us. I talked to another live streamer, and the whole site was down that day. So, Nelson, we met because you're a volunteer and public speaker here at Jewish Family Service. You're also on our Special Needs Partnership Board. You've had a successful career. You've had a career in a couple different fields. Tell me a little bit about your career and why you serve on the Special Needs Board.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm retired now, which is a fun place to be. Get to pick and choose what you want to do.
Yeah.
But I had a successful career, as you said, in retail, in high tech. I was an industrial engineer. I was a project manager. I've written business books. I've taught seminars. I do some volunteering at SMU's business school, teaching a seminar, mentoring MBAs. But I also had a bunch of challenges. And two things in particular sort of informed my career. One, that we'll talk about with special needs and the special needs partnership, why I serve on that, is I have Asperger's syndrome, and I was undiagnosed. I was tested a lot as a kid because I had academic struggles and problems, challenges, but it all came back with no disability, mainly because nobody knew about Asperger's, so nobody's testing for that.
Okay.
So it was a struggle for me, but it made me, or forced me, to compete with everybody as though I had no disability. So I had to figure out a way to become successful in spite of all that. So that was the first thing that sort of defined it. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, maybe, because it impacts not just schoolwork, but regular work, a job, social life, every aspect of your life, really. And the other thing is, I didn't always stay in my lane.
Yeah.
Or more accurately, I didn't always stay in the lane to which people tried to assign me. And, you can do that. I joke with people when I mentor MBA students, I was never qualified to do on paper, I was never qualified to do just about any job I ever had. I was an industrial engineer, struggled with math. I don't have a degree in industrial engineering. I worked in high tech. I was a history major,
okay.
So I don't have that background. So a lot of it was figuring out how to do what you need to do to get the job done. And if you can do that, people start looking at you very differently.
Right, because you're noticed.
You're noticed, and
right.
You're getting done what they need you to get done.
So now let's talk about Asperger's. Like, what was it like for you?
It was tough. It was tough. As I said, the tests, I was tested for disabilities. The tests showed nothing. I was perfectly fine. There was no issue. And the problem is schools and teachers, particularly back then, really didn't know how to deal with somebody who had academic problems and struggled. And even though the disabilities were undiagnosed, clearly there were some issues. And the result was most of my teachers didn't think I was very bright. And because of that, I was often marginalized, a lot of times criticized by my teachers. My parents, who were, very, very involved, they were good, supportive parents, many times had meetings with the guidance counselor and teachers trying to figure out what was going on. And I remember one comment in particular that one of my math teachers, whom I had the misfortune of having 2 years in a row, wrote to the guidance counselor at the request, he's a C plus student and probably isn't capable of being anything more than that.
Wow.
So
that's pretty harsh for a teacher.
that's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
That guidance counselor was even worse. I'll tell you about that in a second. But I was a wizard in history. So I had this dual experience where you're not very bright, you're a C student. And then I am with the smartest kids in the school in history class, just as smart and good as they are. So people are looking at that and they're saying, you're not bright. Well, clearly you are bright and you are capable. It's just you're not trying hard enough. And so you're not trying hard enough. You're not you're not engaging enough and so forth. I was told that a lot. So I was whipsawed between, the two worlds. And then, I couldn't win. And then the guidance counselor actively discouraged me from going to college.
Really?
Yeah. He basically said, your kid's not bright. And he sort of grudgingly wanted me to apply to very mediocre schools. And with the help of my parents, I didn't listen. And again, we'll talk about this maybe a little more, but I didn't stay in the lane. And that was with the help of my parents. He put me in the dumb lane, so to speak, and I didn't stay there. And because I didn't stay there, did constructively, I went to a much better college than he would have ever allowed.
So academically was a struggle. Emotionally on you, definitely a struggle, getting beaten down by the teachers and people that are supposed to be helping you, right? What about other parts of your life, like sports, social?
It was all a struggle.
Yeah.
I had poor social skills, very common for Asperger. That's one of the defining characteristics. So I had poor social skills. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't really understand friendship. I had a very hard time connecting with people in general. Asperger kids like me don't always see the subtleties of nonverbal communication, facial expressions. Our faces are just blank. They're expressionless. Our voices tend to be monotone. And so because we don't see our kids like me, and there are many different forms of Asperger, my particular one, because we don't see facial expressions, the subtleties, the subtle smiles, the, okay, I get what you're saying kind of stuff. We don't exhibit the expected reaction of compliments or criticisms.
Okay.
So particularly as a kid, I was often harshly criticized and not understood because I might be criticized or complimented, and I'm just sitting there like that. No reaction.
Right.
And so if it's a compliment, now you're insulted because I just complimented you and you expect at least a smile or something.
Right.
I'm giving nothing back to you. If it's criticism, I'm still like this.
Just not reacting. Right.
So the person, particularly an adult, is thinking, there's just no getting through to you, kid. None of which is true. What was going on inside of me was very different. But that's what the world was seeing. So it was a struggle all around.
Were you bullied a lot?
I don't think I was bullied more than most kids.
Yeah.
I think it was invisible.
Oh, okay.
I think I was ignored. I wasn't a good student, particularly. I mean, I wasn't a terrible student, but I was middle of the road, middle of the pack. Wasn't a good athlete. I think the only time I was really recognized and noticed was if I made a mistake. If I said the wrong thing in class, the wrong thing at lunch, messed up on the playground, then I got noticed. But I don't think it was true bullying. And for me, because I had a hard time connecting with people, wasn't part of a group, it was much easier to just stay by myself, to be alone, because it was easier than trying to connect with people.
So then, I guess interactions that you had with other people, were they forced interactions?
Um, they were somewhat forced, but mostly a little off base.
Okay.
So, you're expecting me to smile with a compliment. I don't. So people kind of, what's with this guy kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I might talk and, we could talk about a little bit more about Asperger's, but I would talk, or I might engage in conversation and just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
When you've already said, I've heard enough. So it wasn't that I never talked. I was usually quiet in class. But it was more that it wasn't like 180 degrees inappropriate behavior. It was just, what's with him? He's a little off, a little different. He's not what we're expecting. He's not the norm.
Did that affect you emotionally? Like, were you depressed as a kid, or even now as an adult?
I don't think I was depressed. I was probably lonely.
Okay.
I think that I would have liked to have been part of a group, but I didn't know how to become part of a group. So it was more isolation. I did hit a couple of times in my life when I was depressed. And those were when there was major changes. Like I moved to Dallas, I was transferred, I didn't know anyone. And the friends I had made as an adult, I had to leave behind. So, and it's not that unusual that now you're alone, you're lonely, you're thousands of miles from your friends and family.
Right.
And that was a struggle. So, I have encountered that, but I don't think so much as a kid depressed as much as very alone, wanting to connect.
See, that's the thing that is so, like, you're wanting to connect, but then you just don't know how to do it.
Right.
And I guess, like, there's, like you said, like people just didn't really know what to do with you.
Right. And so, understanding my form of Asperger's, I have to think through the world consciously. So, for example, for me, it's like putting together a puzzle. And I have to think about things that you probably and most people never think about. I said it was expressionless blank. I have to think about putting life in my voice, so I'm not speaking in monotone. I have to remember to smile.
Right.
And to smile properly. This is not a smile. Smile with your eyes.
right.
But, trying to you learn to smile as an infant by watching other people smile. But if you don't cognate those nonverbals, you don't learn to smile. You don't learn to have facial expressions. So I have to think that through. I have to think through simple social cues like, hi, Jason, as I'm walking through the hall. I had to teach myself how to do that.
Yeah.
So it's a conscious thought for me to pass you in the hall and to say hello. It's not insincere, but when you came out to pick me up out, just now in the waiting room, JFS, you came out, flashed through my mind. Here's Jason, smile, say hello, shake his hand. That's all a trained, learned response.
And how did you train yourself to learn those nonverbal cues?
I worked with a woman. I was very lucky. I met a woman who was an executive coach. never worked with disabled people, but her business was teaching business executives who left blood in their wake um, how to suddenly become a nice person.
Okay.
So she would work with me and she would tell me what I'm doing wrong, but she couldn't necessarily give me the key to trigger what it is. So, for example, when I'm talking, there are no stop signs in an Asperger kid like me. So I'm making a point. Your facial expression is saying, great, I get it.
Mhm.
And you basically have a facial expression that says stop.
Okay.
You know,
That's that's funny because like my job as a coach, as a career coach, is to just sit and listen
right,
most of the time, right?
right,
Although I do get very excited in talking to, because I love talking to. I love my job. I love talking to people, and there will be times when I know I'm not supposed to be talking, but I get excited. I just interrupt my client, and I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm very excited. They understand because they can see that like the passion, right?
right,
But like that's I did not realize that there was a facial expression for stop,
right.
right?
Because you, it's just, you learn that um, subconsciously as a kid growing up. But if you don't see those things
Yeah.
and learn, you can't give them off. So I have to develop a whole technique of verbal cues in my mind as I'm talking to you to make sure that I'm not um, over talking, that you give me the stop sign and I stop. Eye contact,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we tend to, kids like me tend to look this way. We're looking down. We're not looking at you. We're not making eye contact. We tend to be literal. So I would, when I first was, trying to do this, or a young kid trying to do this one, because they now understand and they, unlike my situation, their interventions at special schools and stuff. So you need to make eye contact. Okay.
Right. But you don't want to. You don't want to be saying you're doing it now, right? Like you're being like a madman, like right up in my face. It's like,
and I'm drilling a hole for you.
I know. I'm like, okay, Nelson, you gotta stop that because it's one of those things too. Like it's that casual eye contact, right? And I think like when we go and make a point, and you just kind of I tend to look like back up over there when I'm talking. But that's funny, and it's like also too. I guess you had to learn like when is it too much? Eye contact. Right.
When is it too much? When is it inappropriate? When JFS sends me out and I speak to parental groups and businesses, and especially kids in school who have issues and disabilities, I talk about this because we have to decipher the world, whether or not, if everybody was like me with Asperger's, I'd be normal, and not that I'm abnormal, but this is a different way of operating, and I have to learn how to operate in that world because that's the world I live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of times when I speak, it's pretty short speech, like 10 minutes, but there's a lot of Q&A, and a lot of the Q&A is around this sort of topic. How do you make your way through the world in a world that's different from you?
That's you mentioned before. Was it how, especially like at work, right? Because you obviously had a very successful career. You've written 2 books on project management. Is that right?
One book that had a second edition.
Okay.
And then a book on business strategy in the commercial market, and then several books for Nortel.
Okay. And they're still using those today, right?
They would be if they were in business.
Okay. Well, right. Yeah. There's that.
But yeah, right. But I wrote the project management book was specifically geared towards the telecom industry because that was a vital part of it, and the companies that sold their products were clueless.
So being a kid and school was hard.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about working with an executive coach who
Right.
helped you out, successful in your career. You said earlier that you refused to stay in your lane,
Right.
but companies are usually pretty siloed and rigid. Like, how were you able to break out of that uh, and and become, or rather, use your ability to be successful?
That's a great question. Um, Interestingly, or I find it interesting. Um,
No, I think it's interesting too. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting in this chair, my friend. So I need you. I want to hear this. This is so.
yeah.
I'm into this.
I was always successful at work. I started working summers at 15,
Okay.
and I worked as a cabana boy, so it was all tips, all personal service. But I was very successful, always successful in my career, in spite of, for a good part of it, being off. I wasn't diagnosed with Asperger's until I was 42.
Wow.
So the bulk of my young career was spent being the Asperger kid. But I started trying to figure out, okay, things have gone really good at work.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked in retail, I worked for Macy's. That was my first real job out of college in store operations. I ended up in their executive training program, which was a big deal back when I started. If you were, even though you didn't stay in retailing, if you had that on your resume, that was a big bonus to applying for other jobs, even outside of retail. Went very far, very fast. Without a frame of reference, I thought it was normal to get promoted every 9 months.
Wow. That's awesome, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I figured out was work is a very structured environment, as you said. So much of it is defined. There are defined relationships, um, peers, customers, subordinates, bosses. There are sort of rules of behavior. People don't always follow them, but there's enough structure at work that I was able to navigate it and to follow my roles and responsibilities and my relationship vis-a-vis everybody around me. I wasn't always perfect, but nobody ever is. Um, Big difference between social, when it's very loosey goosey,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, walking up to you and say slapping you on the back may be appropriate in one environment, and doing that same behavior in a different social setting is totally inappropriate. Um, Work, it was that the structure really helped me understand how to fill the role, whatever that role is, whether I was a manager, a supervisor, a director, an employee, a worker bee.
So it was um, I guess the rules of work you were able to figure out how to operate within it and then go beyond.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, when people are struggling, how what is the culture of your organization? When I teach a seminar at SMU, I talk a lot about culture. That organizational culture is critical, and you need to understand your organization's culture, and you also need to understand when that culture works for you and when it doesn't work for you. Because if the culture doesn't work for you, you are going to struggle, because you're not going to fit in.
Yeah.
So I was able to figure that out most of the time. And the times when I got in trouble at work, so to speak, were when I didn't fit with that culture and I could not figure out really how to conform.
And was that a culture problem, or was that you just weren't able to figure it out?
Um, it was mostly a culture problem.
Okay.
That the behaviors of the people around me were a certain way, and I didn't think that way. I didn't behave that way. I didn't like working that way.
Yeah.
And so I eventually got out because it just got to a point where this isn't working for me. But I had to recognize that.
It's interesting because when I talk to my clients, they're the bulk of everybody is looking for work, and I've been really big lately on coaching them to ask questions in the interview about culture, and not, hey, how's the culture here? Is it good? Not that, but like specific questions that they can get the answers to, and then figure out if it's someplace that they want to work.
Right.
Because you don't want to get into a position where the culture isn't good and you haven't figured that out yet, because you're going to end up leaving.
Right.
Right.
And you're all excited because you're starting a new job. You've been looking for a job. Who knows how long you've been looking, and you finally get one, and you get there, and it's like, oh, this is a problem. They're not reacting to me the way I think they should be. I'm not fitting in, and so on and so forth. So it's critical. When I talk to the MBA students in my strategy seminar, that's one of the things I emphasize. And we don't have time to go in here, but I give them a whole bunch of examples of culture.
I think that's also super cool that you mentor students. I think that overall, universities do a terrible job of getting people prepared for the actual job market. I mean, they put them through, the grind of 4+ years. Here's your degree. Good luck.
Right.
Right. And they do have some counselors, career counselors, but they're not.
Well, the problem is because to their credit, SMU's business school at the graduate level has an MBA mentor program. They've had it for a long time. And students can take advantage of it, and some do, some don't. I've had very, very mixed experiences, from meeting with the student once, never hearing from them again, to standing in for their parents at graduation because they're a foreign student.
Wow.
So all over the map. But generally, it works because the students are trying to figure out, where do I go next? And hearing from someone who's been there, who's been successful, particularly someone who's struggled with a lot of stuff, at least makes them feel like, oh God, I'm not the only person in the world struggling.
That's a good point. Especially, I think, almost like anything, the more buy-in you get from the person, like the better the outcome will be. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and the mentor administrators of the program will tell the students, this isn't supposed to be somebody who's going to help you land the next job. This is supposed to be somebody who's helping you go through business school and prepare for the work world.
Right.
So they try and emphasize that. And like I said, some students take advantage of it and work with me a lot. I've had others who I meet with them once and never hear from them again. And hey, I'm a volunteer. This isn't my job. I'm not getting paid. Nobody's rating me.
That's right. I remember when we met, we first had our first conversation, and that's how you described yourself, was as a professional volunteer.
Yeah.
Because you also work in the food pantry, right?
Yeah, I volunteer at the food pantry. I'm a docent educator at the Holocaust Museum. I serve on a couple of nonprofit boards. What am I going to do with myself? I'm perfectly fine and healthy. And giving back across a spectrum of organizations is fulfilling.
That's awesome. So Nelson, where do people go to find resources for help?
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, in terms of actually getting help, you have to figure out what help you need.
Yes.
Before we get to sort of the formal things, talking to people in your world. One of the most important things, especially when you're struggling, is having people in your life who are supportive, who can advocate for you when necessary. One of the reasons I didn't stay in my lane when I was growing up, and then learned how to constructively not stay in my lane, because you don't just want to, especially as you said, with business, it's all structured.
Yeah.
You don't want to refuse to stay in your lane in a bad way or in a negative way.
Right.
But having parents who advocated for me and helped push me and clear some barriers for me, especially when teachers and guidance counselors weren't helping me, they advocated for me. So having somebody to advocate, but also having somebody just supportive. You may have people in your life who can't necessarily help you find that next job, who can't necessarily be the one to go into school or grad school or whatever and take care of that problem you're having there. But just because they can't do that doesn't mean they shouldn't engage, or you shouldn't be the person engaging. Advocacy matters. Don't let people get isolated. Support always. Yeah. Even if you can't be that person getting the job, stay in touch. Stay in touch with somebody. Be supportive of them. And then, there are more formal structures, depending on what you want. JFS.
Yes.
Or, for the employment service, but also for the counseling service.
Yes.
There is the special needs partnership. If you are a challenged person, or you have a child who is challenged, on the JFS website, you will find that. And there is a web-based guide to all sorts of services in the DFW area that you can tap into, not just JFS,
yes,
but a lot of other organizations to make you aware. And if you have a college-bound student, you may not be aware, but nowadays, most universities have what's called, and it may take varying forms, but accommodative services. They have a small, or depending on the size of your maybe a large, office specifically dedicated to helping special needs kids. So if you've got a kid for Asperger's on the spectrum, ADD, ADHD, dysgraphia, has problems taking tests, whatever it is, there's now an office in your university specifically dedicated to help, and they focus particularly on freshmen and sophomores coming in, because the idea is to help you stabilize and then grow. So if you are not aware of that, and you are a college student, or you are a parent of a student, look that up in your university, do a search. I'm sure you will find it. I'm able to find it almost every time. Some universities are very robust, other universities not so much, but that's help. And you don't do it alone. When I started finding all this out and speaking to some of those organizations, I was thinking to myself, wow, I could have really used this when I was a kid.
Right.
And then I realized I wouldn't have qualified because I was undiagnosed.
It's like kind of a catch-22 there.
Yeah.
Just for everybody that's out there and listening to, our website is www.jfsdallas.org. And also, too, you mentioned the other organizations. You can, if you click on, I believe it's volunteer tab on our site, you can scroll down to Mitzvah Central. They'll give you a whole list of other nonprofit organizations around DFW. So
yeah, and on that JFS website, look for the special needs online guide. It's very robust. It's got a lot of information and a lot of organizations for different kind of help, schools and so forth outside of JFS. JFS can certainly help, but we want to help as many people as possible, and there's a wealth of information on there beyond just this organization.
Yes. Nelson, we're getting close to time. I went very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So the last question that we always ask is just kind of the fun question. for the day. Just kind of get to know you kind of question. So besides your book, what is your favorite novel?
What is my favorite novel? I would say, because I mostly read nonfiction.
Oh, what's your favorite book then? We'll switch it. Yeah.
Well, I got two.
Okay.
Now that you got it. In fiction, Thornton Wilder's Theophilus North, which was, both these books are old. Theophilus North, Thornton Wilder, I think he may have won the Pulitzer for this one, but it's a very feel-good, very uplifting story.
Okay.
So, if you're kind of down or you're looking, Theophilus North is a really good book. And my other book, which is, I think it's out of print now, is Theodore H. White's In Search of History.
Okay.
Which was autobiographical. And in very brief, if you can find it, White was a reporter for Time. He was the one who coined the term Camelot. He wrote Making of the President in 1960, that all these other Making of the President books have followed. But as a young reporter, he met many of the mid-20th century leadership around the world before they were big. So, for example, he's the reporter in the Far East, and I won't go into how he gets there. As a 22, 23-year-old, he goes to Yan'an, where the Mao and Zhou Enlai have taken all their people away from the Japanese to sort of save the movement. And he's in the mountains in Yan'an, and he meets Mao and Zhou when they're marginal leaders. He meets Ho Chi Minh when he's a marginal leader. He meets MacArthur. He meets all these people when they're either only up and coming, or like in MacArthur's case, he's sort of now persona non grata. He's in his down periods before World War II.
Gotcha.
So it's fascinating because you're going, oh my God, he's talking to so-and-so as though they're ordinary people because they haven't made it yet.
Interesting. I know Thornton Wilder. I have not read that book. I liked it. It was a positive one. My favorite novel is actually not all that positive or happy. It's Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which I have, like when I was, like I've read it many times and wrote a paper on it, before when I was a kid in school. But excellent book. Nelson, thank you for being here today. It was awesome talking to you and learning your story. And next week, we will have Jim Warner will be back, and we will be talking about the effects of artificial intelligence on the job search, on both the job seeker and employer side. So we will see you next week. In the meantime, this has been Caffeinate Your Career for this week. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye.